everyone, Emer back with another Mission Impossible episode review. This time I'm doing Season 3, Episode 19 and technically 20. It's a two-parter and it's called The Bunker. So Jim finds his instructions in a parked car this time. The mission is to rescue scientist Eric Rojak, who is being forced to work on a missile project against his will by an enemy power, and his wife Anna needs also to be rescued, and they must destroy the project. There's a wild card in the form of another agent named Alexander Ventlos, who is determined to kill Rojak so that he cannot complete the work. In the apartment scene, we see Barney operating a remote-controlled drone, and the team discusses how Ventlos is as good at disguises as Rollins seems to be. Off we go to wherever the missile is being worked on, in an underground bunker, hence the name of the episode. And we get a bunch of not-so-great TV time showing us a part of the missile going down an elevator to the research lab and being sent into the area where Dr. Rojak is being held. He's clearly antagonistic with his supposed peer, Dr. Drom, who he treats as an unimportant lackey, and has to be reminded by Security Captain Prado that he better keep moving with the work if he wants to be able to spend some time with his wife later. A car containing Colonel Ziegler pulls up to the security headquarters, as we see Ventlos in a nearby phone booth and Willie as a construction worker. Willie tells Jim about the arrival, as we see he and Barney preparing some stuff nearby. Ventlos calls Prado, using Ziegler's voice, telling him to bring some reports to HQ, and looks over at some of Prado's pictures as he drives away. Ziegler gives a status report to his general, indicating that he's putting as much pressure on Rojak as he can. We see Rollin, apparently a hotshot heart surgeon, and Cinnamon hounded by some press about a new surgery technique, as they head to a hotel room where Rollin starts working on Cinnamon's hair, giving her a mask of Anna and then a mask of herself. Just go with it for now. On the road to HQ, Captain Prado sees an officer slumped over in his car and approaches it to investigate. Looking at the officer, he sees himself. He's stunned and then stabbed by Ventlos, who effectively becomes him now. Barney and Jim continue their work as Ziegler leaves HQ and Willie signals them that that's happening. As Ziegler approaches the bunker, Jim puts on an officer's uniform and gets in a military vehicle. Barney sets off the equipment, which simulates an ambush from the hills. Jim approaches the colonel and thanks him for the rescue, saying that he was on his way to find him, and gives him his orders, indicating that he's being assigned to the missile project as extra security because of the Ventlos threat. Barney signals Rollin, and Cinnamon leaves the room, with Barney heading over to the phone relay box used by the bunker and starting some work over there, watching Cinnamon drive by on her way to the bunker. Ventlos, as Prado, also returns to the bunker and is of course allowed in without a fuss. He tries to head down to the lab, but is told that there's a fuel test, so he'll have to wait. Ziegler and Jim arrive shortly after, alongside Ziegler's assistant, Major Stratt. Ziegler sends a message to confirm Jim's identity, and the request is intercepted by Barney, who confirms that Jim is who he says he is. Cinnamon arrives as Stratt calls Ventlos as Prado to the general's office to talk to Jim about the new security protocol that he has. Jim explains it's designed to keep Ventlos out of the facility. Everyone will get an invisible stamp, which will need to be refreshed periodically, and only Jim has a machine that can detect the stamp. Of course, Ventlos as Prado is the first one to get the stamp. LOL. Cinnamon is announced as Major Nadia, with Jim commenting that he has worked with Major Nadia before, but when she enters, Jim says, "That's not Major Nadia." Ziegler transmits her credentials and Barney disaffirms them. Jim tells Ziegler that he thinks he knows what's going on. Ventlos tried to have him killed so that Ventlos could impersonate Jim, and Cinnamon was clearly his accomplice, but she didn't know that the ambush failed, so she arrived as scheduled. Jim suggests that Cinnamon be taken to HQ for interrogation, and Ziegler sends Ventlos as Prado to do just that. Jim is taken to his living quarters and starts setting up the drone hidden in his equipment, placing it in the air vent. Ziegler shows Jim that the door to Rojak's area can only be opened with voice commands from either Stratt, Drom, or himself, with the three magic words. Say them with me.
January suborbital denomination.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun. Cinnamon and Willie share a look as she's brought to HQ and put in the women's detention area, being taken right by Anna Rojak's cell. Willie sets up a winch near a chimney and lowers himself down to the basement, gumming up the alarm system. He dons the security officer's uniform, knocks out the guard, and frees Cinnamon. She heads to Anna's room and says she's here to help, giving the terrified Anna clothes to change into and sends her out with Willie. Meanwhile, back at the bunker, Rojak decides he's had enough and refuses to continue his work, so Ziegler orders Anna to be brought there. Guards come around to check the cells and take Cinnamon as Anna to HQ as Willie and the real Anna head back to the chimney. Right behind them comes a janitor with paper for the incinerator, and they're barely able to hide from him. Cinnamon's disappearance is discovered, and Willie and Anna strap themselves onto the rope winch to get out as a fire is lit under them. On to part 2. Anna and Willie, of course, manage to get out of the chimney, barely, and Willie gets back into his construction outfit, hiding Anna under a tarp. Ziegler and Jim are informed of the escape, with Jim allowing himself a brief smile. That everything is going as planned, so he thinks. Ventlos's Prado returns to the bunker and heads down to the basement, all eyes on Rojak, who for some reason seems to be resuming his work with the missile. So I'm not sure what the hissy fit was about. Anyway, Anna Cinnamon is brought down to the lab, and Ziegler points a pistol at her, when Eric maintains that he won't continue his work. I'm really not sure what's going on there. Jim suggests that Anna talk to her husband first to convince him to cooperate, and Ziegler agrees. The door is opened, tantalizing Ventlos's Prado, who clearly wishes he could just take a shot at Eric, as Cinnamon enters with Eric clearly realizing it's not really Anna, but Cinnamon shushes him. As Anna, he tells him he must continue working and she can't stand the torture anymore, and as she's brought out, tells him quietly to have a look at the ventilator shaft at 2 p.m. Eric is wary, but agrees to continue working. Jim suggests that since there's been an escape from HQ, Anna should be kept at the facility, and Ziegler agrees, telling a yet again frustrated Prado to take her to detention. Jim goes back to his room and sets up the drug to simulate a heart attack for Eric, attaching it to the drone. Meanwhile, Willie and Anna join Barney in the IMF truck as he receives Jim's signal that it's ready. Barney sends the drone through the vents down to the labs. Eric keeps one eye on the clock and another on the vent. Meanwhile, Prado heads back downstairs to the lab's fuel room and notices the fuel mix testing apparatus. The drone gets down to the lab level, but seems to go out of range of Barney's control, so he's forced to boost its power, risking a burnout, but manages to get it to the vent at Eric's lab. Drom enters the lab and wants to discuss calculations, but Jim convinces Ziegler to tell Drom to leave him alone for a bit. Eric is able to get the syringe with the drug and hide the drone with the instructions to inject himself and asks to see his wife. Eric falls down as expected and the doctor is summoned. Ventlos's Prado still can't do anything as there's still a throng of people around him. The doctor says a heart specialist should be called, so here comes Dr. Rollin to the rescue, asking for a life support system so that Eric can be moved to a hospital for open heart surgery. Jim places a call, which is intercepted by Barney, of course, as Ventlos seizes the possibility that Rojak might still survive. Rollin tells Ziegler to summon Anna as per Eric's request. The doctor suggests to Rollin that they might be able to get a life support system going so that Eric can at least be taken up to the main entrance, which would save some time, and Prado is told to take Rollin to see what can be done. However, Ventlos's Prado actually takes Rollin to his office and knocks him out. Using a quick-acting mask kit, which is very neat, Ventlos sets himself up as Rollin and heads back down to the lab, not speaking to anyone but setting up an injection. Jim speaks to Rollin, wondering what's going on, but Ventlos's Rollin doesn't respond. The surprised look on Ventlos's face when he's asked about the injection tips Jim off, and they struggle, with Ventlos taking a tumble outside the lab door and offing some of the guards, heading into the fuel room and killing the poor guy at the station. Ziegler is able to shoot through the locked fuel room door and kill Ventlos, but not before Ventlos adjusts the mixture to set an explosion that will rack the bunker in 7 minutes, so Ziegler orders everyone out. Rollin manages to come to, and Jim tells him it's time to get lost. The personnel head to the missile hoist, which will be faster than the main elevator, as Jim tells Drom to go back and get Rojak's plans. In that confusion, he's able to knock Ziegler out, and Cinnamon as Anna closes the lab door, shutting Drom into the lab. The hoist goes up oh so slowly as Eric recovers, and Cinnamon is able to take off the Anna mask. They manage to get out as the producers channel the spirit of Michael Bay, and the bunker blows sky high. The Rojaks and IMF get into Barney and Willie's waiting ambulance. Mission accomplished. I'm going to give this episode a grade of a B+. I actually had it rated a little bit higher originally, but I noticed a couple of things which I'm going to discuss and bring it down just a little bit from the A minus or so that I originally had it as. First of all, the good. The guest stars. David Shiner is always excellent when he's on mission. I think he's in at least one a season until season 5. I forget whether he's in season 6 or 7. I suspect he isn't. But always a great addition to the show. A lot of the times he's saddled with not so great scripts. This is an okay script and a fine story. I'll have a little bit more to say about it later in terms of the story itself. But yeah, he's a fine addition to the show. Lee Merriweather, of course, we'll see more of her going into season 4. Is great as Anna Rojak, and in part 2, obviously, she plays Cinnamon for quite a bit. Fantastic addition to the show. Milton Selzer is in pretty much every season, I believe, even up till the final season, and is he's also fine in his role as Eric. Regarding the story, it is a good story. It's an earned win for the team. The wild card of Alexander Ventlos is actually a really good addition to this one because it's used very effectively as part of the story. I like it. You know, in other episodes, the writers have kind of experimented with this sort of wild card a little bit. And I can't think of specific examples, but it hasn't worked out very well. The only one that comes to my mind is from season 1 in the episode called Elena, where there's another agent who has, different instructions out there, and that wasn't really great. That was just kind of like shoehorned into the plot. But in this time, I feel rather than being shoehorned, it's kind of weaved into the plot, and the IMF actually uses it instead of seeing it as kind of a hindrance to what they're going to do or what they have to do. So the presence of Ventlos keeps us guessing, as I said. We don't know how the ending is going to play out, and neither does the IMF. And as far as weaving it into the plan, Jim and Cinnamon get their to the bunker by simulating a Ventlos tactic. They're actually using the idea that Ventlos is around in order to, establish their presence, which I thought was actually pretty neat. Another good thing that I'd like to mention is the way that the team has to improv and think on their feet is another good feature of having the wild card of Ventlos in this one. It seems fairly clear to me on rewatch here that Jim's original plan was, to kind of keep his options open because he knows that Ventlos could appear at any minute. They managed to get in using the threat of Ventlos, which gets Jim into the bunker, and Cinnamon, able to impersonate Anna at HQ. And it seems to me that, establishing Rollin as that heart specialist, the idea was most likely that Eric was going to have his heart attack, simulated heart attack, after his injection. Rollin would be summoned, and they would probably take him away to the hospital. And, during that process where, you'd probably have Jim, Rollin, Cinnamon as Anna, with Eric, who was still under the influence of the drug, and then probably one or two guards, and they'd end up somehow overpowering the guards since the guards would be outnumbered. That's a typical IMF ploy, and then be able to join Barney and Willie out in the truck, and mission accomplished. How they would end up destroying the missile that way, I'm not sure. I'm guessing that Jim would have had a plan to somehow sabotage it, because he may very well have been left behind because he's supposed to be there. So I don't know how that part of it would have played out, but it's neat that I feel that Jim was kind of prepared that we need to have options as we go, and we need to be prepared for the idea that something unexpected may happen at any minute. And I think that's managed pretty well, overall in this episode. Again, where this episode is good compared to some that we've seen in the past, there have been some episodes. One that I recall from back in the early part of season 2 was the one called Trek. where you have, competing antagonists, competing bad guys. Uh, and I remember commenting in that episode that it really didn't work very well because, it's always good when we have, our good guys going up against a defined bad guy. And in that episode, I didn't really think it worked that well. Here, I think it does work just fine because the action is kind of confined. It's centered around that bunker and it's centered around the lab, and so we can kind of keep it in a space. In a proper space so we can kind of keep track of it. In previous episodes like Trek, where we had like multiple antagonists, the action kind of kept moving around, and that just kind of made the episode seem a little bit more disjointed. Here, I think it works pretty well. Also really good. The at the end when Ventlos essentially becomes Rollin, I really liked that sequence. Ventlos using a quick acting mask kit is very neat. As I've already mentioned, just the idea that the IMF is going up against somebody who is actually kind of on par with themselves, and is willing and able to use the kind of tactics that they do in order to achieve their goals is great. I also liked the way it's a really subtle thing, but really well done. When Martin Landau essentially becomes Ventlos, playing Rollin, he's a little different. You can see that he's a little bit hunched with his shoulders. His walk and his gait is a little bit different, and I really like that. That was a really kind of neat little subtle touch. Just to kind of establish the fact that he's being a different person technically. So that part is good. Moving on to some of the stuff that's not so good. I wouldn't call any of it necessarily bad, but there are definitely some nits that I have to pick to that do bring the episode grade down a little bit. First of all, it's always a problem with two-parters, where we have a two-parter is generally always a one-parter that just has too much stuff to be a one-parter and just doesn't have enough to become a full two-parter without a lot of padding. We've discussed that before in the previous two-parters. And that's also the case here. There's a lot of time in the beginning where Barney is setting up the initial ambush. There's a lot of time with Barney maneuvering the drone through the vent. And the scene at the end where there's time being spent and we're watching the clock as the hoist is going up with the IMF on it. So there's a lot, and not to mention at the end of part one where Willie and Anna are going up the chimney on that winched rope. As the paper fire is being lit under them. So there's a lot of extra time spent as padding, as is the norm for two-part episodes. That said, I will mention the drone looks really cool. It must have been excellent by 60 standards. Nowadays, with high-definition TV, you can kind of see that, the drone is being, dragged around by wires and that sort of thing. But still, I mean, the way it's set up and the way that it works, that part of it is pretty good. It's a shame that it's basically done as padding. A couple of other things that I noticed. One of them, I'll mention the smaller nit first. At the beginning of part two, Rorschach is working on the missile. He had just finished at the end of part one throwing a hissy fit because he's sick of being, talked to by Drum, who he sees as completely beneath him, I guess. And says, no, I'm not going to do any more work, and and that's the whole point of getting Anna to the bunker. And then suddenly he's working on the missile again, even if he's not doing anything significant. Why is he doing that? Shouldn't he just kind of be pacing around or sitting somewhere just pouting or just doing nothing or whatever? That was really weird, and I didn't like that. I think maybe it was just something, a continuity thing that the writers or the directors didn't realize at the time, but that is a little bit problematic. And another thing that I found that wasn't good at all is the fact that Martin Landau, does very little in this episode until the very end. His part is very pivotal, obviously. So, I mean, I can't fault it that much. It's a shame. One thing that is really a problem in this episode is that, there's so much of this use of masks. I mean, Barbara Bain her face is barely seen at all, right? She's basically played by Lee Merriweather for most of the episode. As a matter of fact, you could say through most of season 3, she's a different Anna every week, and it's going to continue, for the rest of the season. Every week you're this Anna or you're that Anna now. She was Anna Nealis, a couple of episodes ago, as you probably remember, and now she's Anna Rojak, and she's going to be Anna somebody else in a little bit. And so that is problematic. I feel it too much reliance on the masks here. It's fine as part of the story, but it is distracting, and it does take away from the teamwork part of the episode, which, as I've mentioned many times, is really the hallmark of a really good episode. Anyway, that's my review for this episode. As always, thank you all for watching. Please like this episode. Please subscribe to my channel. And please leave your comments. I'd love to hear what you feel about this episode, as always. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you next time.